6 months into the war, the Coalition received intelligence that changed everything. A Karathi spy deep within the Velthari military command transmitted a single encrypted message before going silent forever. The message contained the truth about the Silence Protocol. They built world killers. Admiral Kang said grimly as he briefed the combined Coalition command. 6,000 years ago, when the Velthari first rose to power, they constructed a network of weapons platforms capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The holographic display showed the locations of the platforms, dozens of them hidden throughout Velthari space, all of them connected to a central control station orbiting the Velthari throne world of Velthran Prime. According to our intelligence, the weapons are charging. Kang continued. Earth has been designated as the primary target. Estimated time to full power is 72 hours. The Coalition commanders absorbed this information in horrified silence. Vessel of Currents was the first to speak. Then, we must strike before they can fire. We must destroy the control station. It is the only way. Kang nodded slowly. I agree. But Velthran Prime is the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. The Velthari have concentrated their remaining fleet there, along with orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapons. It pulled up tactical projections. Our combined forces can breach their defenses, but the cost will be enormous. We estimate 60 to 70% casualties before we reach the control station. The room fell silent again. Those numbers meant millions of lives. Human lives, Coalition lives, all sacrificed for a single chance to stop the weapons. Ambassador Mendris spoke up from where he sat with the other Coalition leaders. The Mandari will fight, he said simply. We have lived under Velthari rule for 3 centuries. Our ancestors lost their world to these tyrants. If we must die to ensure no one else suffers our fate, then we die with honor. One by one, the other Coalition representatives voiced their agreement. The Karathi, the Turvani, 12 species in all, pledged their ships and their lives to the attack. Kang felt something tighten in his chest. Gratitude, sorrow, pride. These people who had been strangers 6 months ago were now willing to die alongside humanity, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Then we attack in 48 hours. Kang announced. All ships will converge on Velthran Prime. The human fleet will lead the assault. He held up a hand to forestall objections. We started this war, he said. We will not ask others to bear the heaviest burden. Human ships will break through the defenses. Coalition forces will follow and secure our flanks. And together we will end this. The assault on Velthran Prime began exactly 48 hours later. The Coalition fleet emerged from faster than light travel. At the edge of the system, in perfect formation, 1,200 ships from 13 species. Facing them was everything the Velthari hegemony had left. 800 warships, thousands of defense platforms, the most powerful military force assembled. In 6,000 years, on the bridge of the indomitable Admiral, Kang looked at the enemy formation and felt a strange calm settle over him. Signal all ships, he ordered. Attack pattern Omega. All human vessels to the vanguard. Coalition ships cover our advance. Today we end this war. The human fleet surged forward. Velthari weapons opened fire immediately. Human ships began to die. The destroyer Defiant was the first to fall. Then the cruiser Soul, then the battleship Resilience. But the human advance did not slow. For every ship that fell, 2 more took its place. They pushed through the outer defenses, leaving burning wreckage in their wake. Behind them, the Coalition fleet followed Karathi waterships, Mandari forest cruisers, Tovani needle fighters, all of them fighting and dying alongside their human allies. In the command center of the orbital control station, High Speaker Velthros watched the battle with growing disbelief. They should have retreated by now. He muttered, They have lost 200 ships. Why do they keep coming? His tactical officer had no answer. Humans were not supposed to fight like this. No species fought like this. No species accepted these kinds of losses without breaking. But the humans kept coming, and they were getting closer. How long until the weapons are ready? Velthros demanded 12 minutes, High Speaker. We do not have 12 minutes. He turned to his communications officer. Signal Admiral Kang. I wish to speak with him directly. The channel opened moments later. High Speaker. Kang's voice came through clear despite the chaos of battle around him. Admiral, Velthros said with forced calm, this is madness. You are throwing away your fleet for nothing. Even if you reach this station, you cannot stop the weapons in time. Earth will burn regardless of what happens here. However, I am prepared to offer terms. There was a pause. What terms? Kang asked. Withdraw your forces and submit to Velthri authority. Velthros said, abandon your coalition allies, and I will spare Earth. Your species will become servants of the hegemony, but you will survive. This is my final offer. Kang laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You still do not understand us, do you? We did not fight because you threatened Earth. We fought because you thought you had the right to. We will never bow. And we will never abandon those who stood with us. Then you will die. Velthros snarled. Perhaps, Kang replied. But so will you. The channel closed. The Indomitable and her surviving escorts broke through the final defensive line. The control station lay before them, damaged and desperate but still operational. Target the weapon control systems. Kang ordered. Everything we have. Fire. The Indomitable's weapons blazed. Other human ships joined their fire to hers. Coalition vessels added their own weapons to the barrage. The control station's shields held for 5 seconds. Then they failed. The station came apart in a cascade of explosions. Deep within its structure, the systems controlling the planet-killing weapons went dark across Velthri space. The ancient platforms lost their connection to Central Command. They began emergency shutdown procedures. Earth was safe. High Speaker Velthros died when the station's reactor went critical. He never understood what had happened. He never understood that his greatest mistake was not underestimating human weapons or human technology. It was underestimating human hearts. 1 year later, a new Galactic Accord was signed in the rebuilt Grand Chamber on Nexus Prime Earth. Took its place not as a conqueror, but as a founding member of an alliance built on mutual respect. The Velthri hegemony was dissolved. Its subject species were freed. Its worlds were placed under coalition administration. Ambassador Yoon Saren delivered the closing address. We never wanted war. She said, we never wanted empire. We only wanted to be seen as equals. Now we hope to see everyone that way. On Earth, a memorial was built overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It contained the names of every human who died in the war, and beside it stood a second memorial of equal size, containing the names of every coalition member who died fighting alongside them, and its base was a simple inscription. They came as strangers. They fought as allies. They died as family. They will never be forgotten. Admiral Kang visited the memorial on its dedication day. He stood before the wall of names and wept. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Half the human fleet destroyed, 3 million coalition soldiers dead, entire species, nearly wiped out in the final battle. Yet as he looked at the names, he felt something beyond grief, pride, hope. These people had not died for conquest or glory. They had died for something far more important. The right to be free, the right to choose their own fate, the right to stand with friends against tyranny. The galaxy would never forget what humanity had done, not because they had won a war, but because they had shown that some things were worth fighting for. Even dying for that was humanity's true victory, not the destruction of the Velthri hegemony, but the proof that courage and compassion could triumph over fear and hatred. The stars belonged to everyone now, and humanity would help keep them free forever. 3 weeks after the Battle of the Kuiper Belt, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The mood in the Grand Chamber was very different from the last time humanity had been discussed. Fear had replaced contempt, anger had replaced amusement. High Speaker Velthros, who had assumed leadership after his brother Velthrin's death at the battle, stood at the central podium with fury burning in his yellow eyes. The humans must be destroyed. He declared, "This attack on Council authority cannot be tolerated. We will mobilize the full military strength of the hegemony. We will burn their death world to ash. We will scatter their ashes across the void as a warning to any species that dares defy us." His words echoed through the chamber, but not everyone was listening with agreement. In the upper tiers, where the lesser species sat, a Karathi diplomat named Vessel of Currents watched the proceedings with careful attention. Her people were amphibians from a world of vast oceans. 3 centuries ago, the Velthari discovered valuable minerals beneath those oceans. They had mined without care for the ecosystem. They had poisoned the waters that the Karathi needed to survive. Half her species had died before the mining was complete. The survivors had been relocated to a barren moon and told to be grateful for Velthari protection. Now, Vessel of Currents listened to Velthros demand total war against the only species that had ever successfully defied Velthari rule, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. "Hope, High Speaker." A voice called from the lower tiers. It was Ambassador Maindros of the Mendari people. His species had once inhabited a beautiful forest world. The Velthari had wanted that world for a colony. The Mendari had been relocated to serve as laborers. Their homeworld was now a Velthari resort destination. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. Maindros suggested carefully. The humans treated their prisoners with honor. They did not destroy the ships that surrendered. This suggests they may be open to peaceful resolution. Velthros turned on him with naked contempt. "The Mendari will commit their full military forces to this war," he commanded, "as will every loyal species of the Council. This is not a request." Maindros lowered his gaze and said nothing more. But Vessel of Currents saw his hands trembling with suppressed rage. After the session ended, she made her way through the corridors of Nexus Prime to a small meeting room far from the main chambers. Maindros was already there. So were representatives from 8 other species. All of them had suffered under Velthari rule. All of them had watched the battle footage with the same desperate hope. "We cannot speak openly," Vessel of Currents said as she took her seat. "The Velthari have surveillance everywhere." "Then why are we here?" asked a delegate from the Tovani, whose population had been decimated by a Velthari-engineered plague 2 centuries ago. "Because remaining silent is no longer an option," Maindros replied. He activated a small device that hummed softly, jamming field. He explained, "We have perhaps 10 minutes before security notices. Then we must speak quickly." Vessel of Currents said. She looked around at the assembled delegates. "The humans have done what we always dreamed of doing. They have proven that the Velthari can be defeated. The question is whether we have the courage to join them." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting: open rebellion against the hegemony. It was suicide. It had always been suicide. Every species that had tried had been destroyed. But the humans had changed the calculation. "I have been contacted," Maindros admitted quietly, "by a human agent." Everyone stared at him. "They knew about this meeting before we did," he continued. "They have intelligence capabilities we did not expect." "What did they want?" Vessel of Currents asked. "They wanted to know how they could help us," Maindros said. He let that sink in for a moment. "Not how we could help them," he emphasized. "How they could help us. They offered weapons and supplies. They offered sanctuary for refugees. They offered to fight alongside us if we chose to resist. And they asked for nothing in return except our friendship." The Tovani delegate laughed bitterly. "They lie," she said. "No one offers such things without expecting payment." "Perhaps," Vessel of Currents said slowly, "or perhaps they are simply different." She had spent the past 3 weeks studying everything she could find about humanity. Their history was violent and bloody, but it was also filled with something the galaxy had rarely seen: sacrifice, humans fighting and dying for strangers, humans rushing into danger to save people they had never met, humans building alliances based on shared values rather than shared interests. I reviewed their history. She told the group, they have a concept they call solidarity. It means standing with others not because it benefits you, but because it is right. They have died by the millions throughout their history defending this principle. She paused. I believe them. I believe they will help us because that is who they are. The debate continued for the remaining minutes of the jamming field. In the end, 8 of the 10 delegates agreed to make contact with the human agent. They would form a secret alliance. They would call it the Coalition of Free Worlds. Over the following weeks, the coalition grew. Species that had been crushed under Velthari rule for centuries found the courage to resist. Human ships began smuggling weapons and supplies through routes the Velthari had never discovered. Human advisors began training resistance fighters on a dozen worlds. The Velthari noticed that something had changed. Their subjects were no longer as obedient. Their orders were no longer followed as quickly. Their surveillance detected whispers of rebellion that vanished before they could be traced. High Speaker Velthros summoned his military council. The humans are corrupting our subjects, he announced. They are spreading their disease of defiance throughout our territory. We must act decisively before this infection spreads further. His senior admiral studied the strategic displays with a troubled expression. High Speaker, we have identified human contact with at least 15 species in our territory. If they all join the humans, we will face enemies on multiple fronts. Then we must crush the humans before that happens. Velthro said, activate the silence protocol. The admiral went pale. High Speaker, that weapon has not been used in 6,000 years. It was built for exactly this situation. Velthros replied coldly, a threat that cannot be defeated by conventional means. He rose from his seat. The humans believe they are special. They believe their death world has made them stronger than us. We will show them what true power looks like. We will burn their world to ash and salt the ground where it stood, and every species in the galaxy will remember what happens to those who defy the hegemony. The silence protocol was activated across Volthuri. Space ancient weapons platforms began to wake from 6,000 years of dormancy. The final battle was approaching, and humanity did not yet know the true danger they faced. Overseer Thelerin refused to believe what his sensors were telling him. 2,000 ships was impossible. The humans had 40 registered vessels. Council intelligence had confirmed this fact 100 times over the past 50 years, and yet the tactical display showed an armada surrounding his fleet on 3 sides, with more ships emerging from hidden positions every minute. Overseer, his tactical officer said with poorly concealed fear in his voice, the human formation is complete. Their weapons are powered and targeting our vessels. Thelerin straightened his posture and forced confidence into his voice. This changes nothing, he declared. The humans are bluffing. They are a primitive species from a death world. They lack the will to fire on a council fleet. His officers exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared contradict him. The Volthuri had dominated galactic politics for 6,000 years. No species had ever successfully defied them. The humans would be no different. Signal the fleet, Thelerin ordered. We will proceed with the transition as planned. Inform the humans that their demonstration has been noted and will be reported to the Council for appropriate disciplinary action. The message was sent 25 minutes of. The deadline remained on the bridge of the human flagship, Indomitable Admiral Kang. Ji-hoon read the Volthuri response and shook his head slowly. They still think we are bluffing, he said to his command staff. Should we extend the deadline, sir? His executive officer asked. Kong considered for a moment. No, he decided. The time for talking ended when the council declared us to be animals. They have their 30 minutes. Not a second more. He turned to his communications officer. "Signal all ships to stand ready and activate the Ghost Protocol." The Ghost Protocol was humanity's secret weapon. For decades, human hackers and programmers had been studying Council technology. They have found weaknesses that the Council did not even know existed, security flaws in the standardized systems that every Council species used. Now those weaknesses would be exploited on Thelron's flagship. The lights flickered console. Screens went dark for a moment and then came back online, showing error messages in human script. "What is happening?" Thelron demanded. "We are under cyber attic." His technical officer reported with rising panic. "The humans are in our systems." "Impossible," Thelron snarled. "Our security protocols are centuries more advanced than anything they could develop." "With respect, Overseer, our security protocols are centuries old," the officer replied. "The humans have had 50 years to study them." Across the Council, fleet ships began to go dark. Weapon systems shut down. Engine controls locked out their operators. Life support remained online because the humans were not trying to kill anyone yet. They were simply proving a point. The deadline expired on the indomitable Admiral Kang spoke into the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. The deadline has passed. The Council fleet has refused to withdraw. However, we will offer them one more chance. Weapons free on my command only. Target their flagship. Fire a warning shot across their bow on the Valkyrie flagship." Thelron watched helplessly as a beam of coherent light passed within meters of his bridge. The heat of its passage cracked the transparent viewing panels. His crew screamed and dove for cover. That was a warning. Kang's voice announced, "The next shot will not miss. You have 60 seconds to surrender." Thelron's scales had gone pale, but his pride still burned. "Find a way to restore weapons," he ordered through clenched teeth. "Use manual overrides if you must. We will not be humiliated by these animals." His weapons officer worked frantically at his console. After 40 seconds, he looked up with grim satisfaction. "I have partial control of the forward batteries, Overseer." "Fire." Thelron ordered the Valkyrie. Flagship's forward weapons came online and unleashed a barrage at the nearest human ship. The shots went wide as the targeting system struggled without computer assistance, but they had fired. They had rejected the offer of surrender. Admiral Kang watched the enemy fire streak past his vessels and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had hoped they would see reason. He had hoped that bloodshed could be avoided, but the Valkyrie had made their choice. "All ships," he said quietly. "Weapons free. Target the enemy flagship. Fire." 12 human battleships fired simultaneously. Their weapons were not the outdated technology the Council expected. They were something new, something human engineers had developed. In secret, over decades of hidden research, the beams converged on the Valkyrie flagship. The ship's shields, which had protected Valkyrie vessels for thousands of years, held for exactly 2.3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The flagship came apart in a flash of light that was visible across the entire system. Thelron and his crew died so quickly, they never knew what hit them. Admiral Kang felt no satisfaction watching the enemy ship die, only a deep weariness and the knowledge that this was just the beginning. "Signal the remaining Council vessels," he ordered. "Offer them one final chance to surrender. Make it clear that we will accept their surrender honorably. Their crews will be treated as prisoners of war, not as enemies to be destroyed." The surviving Council ships had watched their invincible flagship die in seconds. Their weapons were still locked out. Their engines were still disabled. They were helpless. One by one, they signaled their surrender. 20 ships had been destroyed in the brief exchange of fire. The remaining 280 lowered their shields and awaited boarding. Human marine teams moved efficiently through the captured vessels. They secured the crews without unnecessary violence. They treated the wounded regardless of species. They behaved with a discipline and professionalism that confused their prisoners. Why do you not execute us? One captured Velthari officer asked as human medics treated his injuries. The Marine sergeant overseeing the processing looked at him with something like pity, because we are not animals. She said simply, within hours the battle was over. The Council's administrative fleet had been completely neutralized. Earth had declared war, and Earth had won the first battle with almost no casualties. Admiral Kang ordered the battle footage transmitted to every species in Council space. Along with the footage came a simple message. We asked for respect. We were given contempt. We will not ask again. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under Velthari domination for centuries watched the footage in stunned silence. The invincible masters had been defeated. The impossible had happened, and on a dozen worlds, resistance movements that had been dormant for generations began to stir. The war had just begun, but everything had already changed. Ambassador Yoon Siren stood at the center of the Grand Chamber and looked up at the circular tiers of alien delegates who stared down at her with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. The Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime were designed to intimidate, and they succeeded at this purpose very well. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive amphitheater, and the lone human at the center seemed impossibly small beneath their collective gaze. Yoon had prepared for this moment her entire career. She wore the formal black uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with silver trim that caught the chamber's pale blue light. Her hands were steady as she held the data tablet containing humanity's formal petition for full council membership. 50 years as an observer species had led to this single moment. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council. Yoon began in a clear voice that the translation systems carried to every ear and audio receptor in the chamber. I present Earth's petition for full membership in this august body. She touched her tablet, and holographic displays bloomed around her, showing humanity's contributions over the past 5 decades. Medical breakthroughs that had saved millions of lives across 12 species. Disaster relief efforts where human volunteers had rushed into danger zones that other species considered too hazardous. Diplomatic negotiations where Earth's ambassadors had helped resolve conflicts that had lasted for centuries. We have proven ourselves. Yoon continued, not through conquest or domination, but through service and cooperation. The display shifted to show human scientists working alongside alien researchers and human aid workers distributing supplies on famine-stricken worlds, and human diplomats shaking appendages with beings of every description. We ask only for what we have earned. Yoon said, a seat at this table and a voice in the decisions that shape our shared galaxy. She lowered the tablet and waited. The silence stretched on for several long seconds before a sound like grinding stones filled the chamber. It was laughter. High Speaker Velthrin of the Velthari hegemony rose from his elevated position at the chamber's apex. He was tall even by the standards of his species, with deep purple scales and 4 arms that he spread wide in a gesture of mock welcome. How charming, Velthrin said in a voice that dripped with amusement. The little Deathworlders wish to sit among their betters. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Velthari delegation and their allied species. Yoon felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral, with respect. High Speaker, I fail to see how our planetary classification is relevant to our petition. You fail to see many things, Velthrin replied, which is precisely why your petition is denied. He gestured, and new holographic displays appeared showing data that Yoon recognized immediately. Earth's environmental statistics, the high gravity and extreme temperature variations, the dangerous wildlife and unpredictable weather patterns, the cosmic radiation levels that would kill most species within hours. Your homeworld is classified as a Category 7 death world, Velthrin announced as if reading a death sentence. The highest rating possible. We are aware of this, Yoon said carefully. Then you should understand why we cannot possibly accept you as equals. Velthrin continued. beings that evolve on. Such worlds are inherently dangerous and unstable. He waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Your species lives for barely a century. He said, you make decisions based on emotion rather than logic, and you possess an inexplicable tendency toward violence. That makes you unsuitable for civilized governance. Yoon took a slow breath. Many species represented here have shorter lifespans than humanity. She pointed out, and I would argue that our emotional capacity has been an asset in our diplomatic efforts. Your argument is irrelevant. The Vulthuran cut her off. The council has reached its decision. He paused, and something in his expression shifted from contempt to something colder. However, we have also determined that simple rejection is insufficient given the potential threat your species represents. Yoon felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Vulthuran smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression on his reptilian face, effective immediately. Humanity is reclassified from observer species to protected fauna. The words hit Yoon like a physical blow. She heard gasps from the few delegations that had supported Earth's petition protected fauna. The classification was reserved for primitive species incapable of self-governance. It stripped away every legal protection and diplomatic standing that humanity had earned. This classification, Vulthuran continued with obvious satisfaction, places Earth and all human territories under council guardianship for your own protection, of course. Of course, Yoon repeated flatly. The council will assume administration of Earth's resources to ensure their proper management. Vulthuran went on, and human populations may be relocated as necessary for their safety and the safety of others. The meaning was clear. Earth would be stripped of its resources, its people scattered across the galaxy as a labor force, its culture and identity erased within a generation. All perfectly legal under council law. Yoon looked up at the tiers of delegates. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke against the decision. The Vulthuri hegemony had dominated galactic politics for 6,000 years. No one dared challenge them. Yoon lowered her gaze to her diplomatic credentials, the silver medallion that marked her as Earth's voice in this chamber. She reached up and removed it from around her neck. The chamber fell silent as she walked slowly to the speaker's podium where Vulthuran stood watching her with amusement. She placed the medallion on the podium's surface with a soft click that somehow echoed through the vast space. Then she looked up at Vulthuran and spoke. 6 words in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. You will regret this decision. Vulthuran laughed again. Is that a threat? Little human? It is a statement of fact, Yoon replied. She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. Her footsteps were the only sound in the sudden stillness. She had almost reached the doors when the lights began to flicker. Every display screen in the chamber suddenly switched to the same image, a blue and green planet hanging in the darkness of space, Earth. A transmission began to play. It was not words, but a signal, a coordination pulse that every human vessel in council space would recognize. The pulse meant one thing: come home now. One of the Vulthuri delegates checked his console, and his scales paled visibly. High speaker, he said in a shaking voice. Human vessels throughout council space are moving. Vulthuran frowned. Moving where? Toward their home system, the delegate replied. All of them. He paused and checked his readings again. Every registered human ship is converging on Sol. Yoon stopped at the door and looked back over her shoulder. 40 registered vessels. She said calmly, That is what your records show, yes? Vulthuran nodded slowly. 40 vessels cannot threaten the council, he said, but there was something uncertain in his voice. Now Yoon smiled, and it reminded several delegates of the predators that stalked their own homeworlds. High speaker, she said quietly. Did you really think we trusted you? She stepped through the doors, and they closed behind her with a sound like a coffin sealing. Vulthuran stood frozen for a long moment. Then he turned to his military advisor. Send a fleet to Earth, he ordered. 300 ships should be sufficient to begin the transition process. At once, High Speaker. The advisor hurried away to carry out the order. None of them understood what they had just done. None of them realized that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first day they made contact with the Council. None of them knew that the 40 registered vessels were just the ones Earth had allowed them to see. The Galactic Council had made its decision. Now, they would learn the consequences. 48 hours after the Council's declaration, the world had changed forever. Park Minjun had been retired for 7 years when the black vehicle arrived at his small house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He had been tending his garden and enjoying the peace that came after 4 decades of military service. The 2 officers who stepped out of the vehicle wore expressions that told him everything he needed to know. Before they spoke a single word, Admiral Park, the senior officer, said with a crisp salute, "The Parliament has invoked the Declaration of Unified Response." Minjun set down his gardening tools slowly. The declaration had not been used in 80 years. It meant that every government on Earth had agreed to consolidate under a single wartime authority. It meant that humanity was preparing for a fight. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Fleet Command, sir." The officer replied, "You have been recalled to active duty by unanimous vote of the Parliament." 2 hours later, Minjun stood in the command center beneath the Alps, where the United Earth Parliament had convened an emergency session. He watched the representatives from every nation arguing and debating and slowly coming to the same conclusion. They had no choice. The Council had not declared war. They had declared humanity to be animals, property to be managed and relocated as their new masters saw fit. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Earth would fight. Across the planet, the message spread through every news channel and emergency broadcast system. Citizens of Earth. The Parliament Speaker announced, "We have been told that we are not worthy of respect. We have been told that our world makes us dangerous and our emotions make us unstable. We have been told that we will be protected whether we wish it or not. We reject this judgment. We reject this authority. We reject any power that claims the right to decide our fate without our consent. From this moment forward, Earth is at war." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Recruitment centers that had been nearly empty for decades were suddenly flooded with volunteers. Factories that had been producing consumer goods received new orders and began shifting to military production. Scientists who had been working on theoretical projects found themselves reassigned to weapons development with unlimited budgets. In a shipyard hidden in the asteroid belt, a young engineer named Cho Yoonji received her own orders. She had spent 5 years working on what she had been told was an experimental mining vessel. Now she learned the truth. This is a battleship. Her supervisor explained as he led her through corridors that suddenly made much more sense. One of 347 that we have built in secret over the past 30 years. Yoonji stared at him. 347? The Council thinks we have 40 ships. Her supervisor said with a grim smile. They were always meant to think that. He handed her a tablet with her new assignment. You are now chief engineer of the battleship Indomitable. He told her, congratulations on your promotion on a training base in the Gobi Desert. A young pilot named Beek Jiwoo completed her final qualification flight and received her wings. She had joined the military 2 years ago, hoping to see the galaxy. Now she would see it through the targeting display of a strike fighter. The Council fleet is 3 days out. Her commander briefed the assembled pilots. 300 ships expecting no resistance. He pulled up a tactical display showing the Sol system. Red dots marked the incoming Council fleet. Blue dots marked Earth's response. There were far more blue dots than red. They think they are coming to take possession of helpless animals. The commander continued, we are going to show them how wrong they are. Jiwoo looked at the faces of her fellow pilots. Some were scared. Some were angry. All of them were determined. None of them would run in the Parliament chamber. Admiral Park stood before the assembled representatives and delivered his assessment. "The Council fleet will arrive in 72 hours," he reported. "They are expecting a symbolic show of force at most. Instead, they will find the Soul Defense Grid fully activated." He touched a control, and the holographic display showed the true extent of humanity's preparations. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt held hundreds of warships. Defensive platforms disguised as mining stations orbited every major body in the system. Weapons satellites that had been sleeping for decades were coming online. "We have 2,106 combat-ready vessels," Park announced. "We have orbital defense platforms armed with weapons the Council does not know we possess. We have been preparing for this day since we first made contact with the wider galaxy." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. "Why? Were we not told?" One representative demanded. "Because we could not risk the information reaching the Council," Park replied. "The preparations were authorized by a secret vote of the Parliament 40 years ago, when it became clear that the Council would never accept us as equals." He paused and looked around the chamber. "Our ancestors hoped this day would never come," he said quietly. "They hoped that we could earn our place through peaceful means. That hope is gone now. The Council has made their intentions clear. They will strip our world of resources. They will scatter our people across the galaxy. They will erase everything that makes us human." His voice hardened. "We will not allow this. We will meet them at the edge of our system. We will give them one chance to withdraw. And when they refuse, we will teach them why humanity survived." A death world. The Parliament voted to approve full military authority. The preparations accelerated. Ships that had been hidden for years moved into formation. Crews who had trained in secret took their stations weapons that had never been fired. In anger, powered up and awaited their targets. 3 days later, the Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Overseer Thelron of the Veltharii stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the tactical display with smug satisfaction. "Signal the humans," he ordered. "Inform them that we have come to begin the transition process and that any resistance will be met with appropriate force." His communications officer sent the message. The response came 30 seconds later, but it was not a message. It was a wall of sensor contacts appearing out of nowhere, ships rising from hidden berths on asteroids and moons, platforms dropping their camouflage and revealing weapon systems that glowed with deadly power. 2,000 ships where there should have been 40. Thelon felt his scales go cold. "This is Earth Defense Command to unidentified vessels." A human voice announced on all frequencies. "You have entered sovereign human space without authorization. You have 30 minutes to withdraw. There will be no second warning." Thelron stared at the display as the human fleet moved into attack. Formation with perfect coordination. He had expected frightened animals begging for mercy. Instead, he faced an armada that outnumbered his own force 7-1. The Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake, and now they would pay for it.